Hello, art students! For everything in life, there is always a first time. And this is the first time for my art student, and hopefully for you, to start painting in oil. Since I teach the Russian academic drawing and painting method, I am introducing my student to oil painting after nearly 3 years of training in drawing and watercolor painting. She already knows all the rules, basically. She is just transitioning into a more of a solid classic technique so she could widen her portfolio and understand how all the masterful paintings were actually created. So I am introducing her to all the supplies and materials, and then we are practicing on a very simple still life. This is not the video where I explain all the rules of measurement, perspective, proportion, or light, shadow, and reflections. This is where I expect you already know all of this, and you just need to know how to transition from other mediums into oil painting. I hope you find this video very helpful. Let me know in the comments. Also, please like this video, share it with someone, support me on Patreon, visit my website, and buy a painting. Until next time. Alright, so we're gonna be starting with mounting your canvas. I'm gonna give you this 6x6 one. This is where you're gonna do your practice run, okay? You can practice mixing paint and putting it on canvas. This is a Raphael panel. This one is 5x7. It's high quality, specifically for painting in oil. Okay, so they make different canvases, different panels. For students, they usually do something very cheap. It has, see the linen here, the linen cloth is mounted to the board, and that linen cloth then has ground. So it has, some people put gesso on it. This is a special formula. It's not just regular gesso, it has rabbit glue in it, and it's made specifically for oil painting. You can't use it for acrylic, watercolor, or anything else. All right? The reason that you want to use something that's made specifically for oil is the eventual quality of your work and how long lasting it's going to be. So if you use cheaper canvases or panels that just have regular gesso and it's for oil and what are they called, acrylics, you know, even pastels that are oil pastels and so on, if they say it's like multi-use, you can use different mediums. Those are good if you're still practicing and you're not too good at it and you know you're just going to paint a lot of things, probably throw them away at the end.
Throw them away?
Yeah, if it's like not really good quality, you're just practicing, you're like not really good at it, and you need a lot of practice, and you know you're going to have a lot of failed paintings. Nothing big. I'm talking about small things, right? When you're just starting out. However, because you've already been studying for a long time and you've been painting in watercolor, that's not your case. So my suggestion is if you want to transition to oil, you get better quality supplies, right? Because you already kind of know what you're doing. It's not going to be too different from watercolor, only different in the technical aspects, but not how and what you do with colors themselves. All right? So here I have this mineral spirits that generally I use for cleaning the brushes off, whether you're cleaning at the end of your painting session or you are cleaning in between. Like, for example, if you're working on something very dark in the painting, and then you want to use the same brush and work on lighter areas, like very light.
You don't use water?
You don't use water. You have to use these mediums because it's oil paint. has a lot of oil in it, and water will not dilute it. That's why fat always floats on top of the soup, because the fat and water, anything that's fatty, oily, always floats on top of the water because it's a different substance. The water can't dilute it. Okay, so cleaning with water is not good. You need the mineral spirits. This thing, okay. This comes in big bottles, easy to get. Then the other thing that thins your oil paints is oil. Since the oil paint already has the good amount of oil in it, to make it thinner, you add more oil. So if you want a real thin glaze layer of oil paint, then you add more oil.
Does it have to be specifically these brands?
It doesn't have to be this brand, although walnut oil is slightly better quality. It's a pretty good brand. It's less yellowing with time than linseed. Yeah. Linseed oil is another one you can use, but if you want a more long-lasting quality paintings, more archival quality, generally don't use linseed. For student work, like I said, lots of practice where you're probably going to mostly throw it away, linseed will work. But with time, linseed oil tends to turn yellow. And that affects all the colors that it's mixed with.
So you could, without like sesame oil, does it have to be walnut oil?
I never heard of sesame oil used for painting. Maybe in the Asian countries.
Huh. It's because
I'm
you're
not
saying
sure.
like oil, so I'm
Right.
thinking of like almost every possible
Right.
cooking oil.
So this is not food grade oil. This is for art only.
Really?
Yeah. So anyway, so I use walnut oil. It's very good. So putting them here in these two little containers like this is pretty standard. This already had a few brushes cleaned in it, so that's why it's so muddied up. But this is your mineral spirits and this is your oil. Then we have this palette. I'm giving you this waxed paper. Comes in this big stack. And basically you mix your oil paint on it. When you're done, you want to just peel it, throw it away. If you have plenty of oil paints left on it, you can put it in a box, Ziploc bag, and put it in the freezer. And the paint that's on it will stay longer without drying up. Mm-hmm. Okay. So the wax paper is very practical, and you can easily clean it up as well. Like you got a whole bunch of stuff going on here, different paint colors and smudges, and you want more space to mix cleaner colors. You can just scrape it up with your palette knife, wipe it up with a paper towel, and use it again. Yeah. So it can be used for a while until finally you've done everything you could, peel it, throw it away.
Damn.
Yeah, it saves time. So I use it because I do a lot of work on plein air and on location, and many times I just don't have the facilities to go and clean my big palette. Oh. You see, so if you're like camping somewhere for days painting, wax, this kind of palette is the most practical thing.
You can't use the other side.
Yeah. Only on this side. Oh. You wouldn't want to. Once the paint starts drying up in here, the other side becomes too rough, too bumpy.
Oh, well.
Yeah. So anyway, so you'll try this one out. So we went over. Now you will need a paper towel again. So your paper towel is all the same ones you've been using. It's that Viva, very absorbent. You'll need a palette knife. Various sizes. If you're doing smaller paintings, you don't need a bigger palette knife. Palette knife is good for mixing your paint. Mm-hmm. So instead of mixing it with the brush like you do in watercolor, you can mix it with the palette knife and then use the brush. Okay, and so then I use Old Holland paints. Again, this is high quality, because I'm focusing on the very long-lasting archival work. you don't have to buy all Holland brand. You can buy the same colors in like Winsor and Newton, which is the same as your watercolor, right?
Same brand?
Same brand as your watercolor, and even the names of colors are the same. You're just buying it in oil instead of watercolor.
And more expensive.
Actually, the Winsor and Newton is not very expensive, actually.
Really?
Yeah. So here in oil painting, you get your paints laid out, squeezed on your palette. And you don't need much actually to complete a painting. You don't need a lot to be squeezed out, especially when we're working on such small size paintings
That's
as
a lot
this.
of white.
Yeah, you will need more white.
Oh, wowie.
So this is cadmium yellow, same as in your watercolors. This is Indian yellow.
That looks orange.
Mm-hmm. Where's my...
You can't revive them once they're dried, huh?
So for example, here I have the Winsor and Newton oil colors.
Rose permanent.
Right. So you can certainly go between brands. You don't have to stick with one brand.
Yeah.
So I have Persian or Indian red. Again, see, it's
Watery.
this is oil.
Or oily.
Yeah. I have cyan, which is different type of blue. So I use cyan sparingly, very little. I don't use a lot of cyan.
What is it called?
Cyan.
That's it?
Mm-hmm. Cyan blue. And ultramarine blue. So
You don't have Winsor blue?
no Winsor. You see, in watercolor, Winsor blue, and for what you're doing, for the amount of work you're doing with still life and flowers and so on, Winsor blue is the kind of color that you can push both toward the nice purple with the red and toward the nice green with the yellows,
Yeah.
right? In landscape painting, I'm using two different ones because Winsor blue produces it a little bit too strong, too vibrant blues and greens and purples.
You don't work with vibrant colors?
Actually, I do, but I don't start with very vibrant. So if you can see that basically what is happening with that ultramarine and cyan next to each other, one is already leaning a little bit more toward green, the other is leaning toward the purple. And instead of using just one blue like Winsor, I'm using those two. So then I can make very vibrant blue sky that has a little bit of that greenishness to it, turquoise, push, yeah. And then with the ultramarine, that's already leaning a little purpley, easier to make all the landscape portions, mountains, faraway mountains, and all. Sometimes, so ocean sometimes reflects the sky very strongly, right?
Yeah.
And therefore you will be using cyan. So because I work on plein air, and I need those to be achieved very quickly, I don't have a long time to push my colors this way and that way. This makes it easier, okay? Makes it faster and easier. All right, so you see how I already positioned them, right?
Yeah.
And actually with just this, you can do a lot of work already. You can do plenty of still lifes with just those colors.
Ain't that magic?
Right. And the only other thing is you may want to get some kind of red to it. You can do vermilion, or you can do this permanent throws.
I hate when a paint gets stuck like that.
Yeah, it's because I'm not using it very often.
So it's just...
Yeah, it can dry up, but that's what I have the pliers for. All right, so here we go. We'll use the permanent throws for your red. You will see how the permanent rose is easily also pushed toward orange or toward purpley. Right? And as you see, I don't have black. I have this, what is called green lake. It's not even made very often, but it's the kind of black that if you mix it with white, becomes kind of green, but not very strong green. This one I use sparingly once in a great while to achieve a very dark effect, some darkness. And I also add other colors to it. And if you mix it with white, and it becomes that very mild type of green, kind of grayish green, it will start acting with other colors, interacting with other colors as if it was green. Okay, so I'm gonna squeeze it here for you. But you're gonna keep in mind that this is not your everyday color. Okay, this is not for majority of your paintings, can be absolutely done without it. I am only introducing you to the fact that
it exists.
There is no such thing as true black. They all have some kind of color to them. And you don't want to use or overuse the black as a color for your darker areas or for darkening other, like shadows of other objects. You don't want to do that. There is either zinc white or titanium white, either one. This is titanium. So titanium is more white, more like dead white, and zinc has a teeny bit of a hue to it, more on the warmer side, very teeny bit. Okay, so I think we went over everything pretty much. In terms of brushes, there's different types, but basically you can start using this Hog. I generally don't like brushes that are synthetic. They don't hold the paint nearly as well. But this one is just general Hog bristle. And there are different brushes again, different shapes of them. I like filberts. Sometimes I use flats, but what you're doing right now, this too is good enough. You can have your two different types of palette knives. They are also good in a couple of sizes. Smaller ones for mixing smaller amounts of paint, scraping things up, and all larger ones for doing the bigger areas. You're doing the very small canvases for practice, so this is plenty. You don't need a lot of paint or a lot of anything here. So you don't need a lot of medium. And by medium, I mean either walnut oil or mineral spirits, all right? You can start painting with oil paints right away just by using the thickness and the softness of the oil paints themselves right out of the tube. Wow. You don't have to make them very thin, all right? It's not a requirement. So for example, what I want you to do is I want you to pick up a little bit of paint like this. I want you to lay it down over here. And I want you to pick up a little bit of yellow, not a ton. You see, I didn't even clean the palette knife. I just went and picked it up. It's lighter colors. They don't muddy each other up, and I'm being very careful. And just mix it like that. See how I just patted it together? See how I can scrape it? I can pick up completely on the palette knife. I can like put it back down. I can mix it here, move it to another location where I'm mixing something else, you see?
Move it to another location.
Yeah. And so basically, see how you get to feel your paint, you get to feel how it feels. to mix it. And you can pick up some of it on the tip, and you can go and give me one smudge like this and see how it feels. See?
Mm-hmm.
And you smudged it. Okay, you got some left in here, fine. So now that mixing this color is finished, now you can just plain go, dip it in your paper towel, wipe it clean, fairly clean, and continue to the next one. Again, so first you're gonna be seeing what your colors can offer. So you did this yellow. Let's go and get another white here down and pick up another next color. Let's pick up this Indian yellow, just a little bit, okay? A little bit of white, a little bit of Indian yellow, and mix it together and see the kind of very light hue, right? Very light hue, but different from the other yellow. Here it's very strong, here it's more mild, same thing. You can mix it pretty thoroughly with this palette knife. And then you can pick up a little bit, get it very organized, pick up some and go ahead and give it one next to the yellow. See the hue? It's almost becoming a skin tone of some sort.
Oak.
Mm-hmm. Again, clean off your paper towel, right? And do it with the other ones. Just a little bit of white, back down here. Next one is Indian red. Okay. Also called this Persian red. I'm just picking up just a little bit because this is a very potent color. Mix it with white. It's potent and it's dark, right? So when you mix it like this on your palette, and the gray color also helps you not to compare it to pure white. When you're mixing it like this on the palette with white, you start seeing that it gives you some kind of almost like peachy, purpley hue, right? It's not a very strong color when it's mixed with yellow, with white. Sorry, wow. Look at that. It's almost like...
It's actually a clean color. I would never actually guess.
Mm-hmm. But you see how it's leaning toward the purple scale, right?
Yeah. It looks like something from clothes.
You remember that, right? All right, so go ahead and do it with the others. And when there is a next step to explain, I will explain that.
More complicated than I thought it would.
Okay.
Like mixing them was harder than actually putting it on the canvas.
So you'll get used to it. You need to get used to mixing it so you don't even think about it. Okay. So the next phase. So now we're going to combine two colors. All right. I'm going to ask you to again take a little bit of white, put it down here. All right. And then to that white, you're going to add this yellow. Again, only a little bit of yellow. And you don't have to mix it thoroughly, just a little bit. Clean up your thing, go to one of the blues, okay? Take a little bit of your ultramarine blue, like a tiny, tiny one, because it's so dark. And mix it in.
What the hell?
Yeah. What kind of green is it?
It's a flower green.
Yeah, very nice green, right? Very light, very nice. Whether it's warm green or cooler green, we can't determine yet because it all depends on the context of other colors around, right? And so right now you are mixing just to see how it works. So again, you leave some on your palette. You take this and we're gonna go under this yellow down here. And you will see how this yellow that you already have above, right? This is your yellow present in here. You can see how it relates to each other, right? Okay, that's relates pretty good. This yellow and that yellow. All right, clean up. And underneath we're gonna do the other yellow now. Sorry, the other blue, right? So now I'm gonna go sideways. Take a little bit of this yellow, back to your white, take a little bit of your cyan, a very tiny bit, right? Because it's very strong type of color, just a smudge. And add it to your yellow-white mixture. What do you see happening?
Bluer version of that.
Blue or green, right? So now that you will take this, let's mix them thoroughly. Now when you take this and put it on your palette, on your canvas, you will now compare the two greens that you mixed. And you can see that one becomes looking warmer, the other becomes looking cooler, right?
Wow.
You sense the connection with the yellow, right?
Yeah.
But you also see how it's going a lot cooler here.
Very
That
majestic.
relates to there. This also somewhat relates to there, right?
Yeah.
All right, we're going to do the same thing with your Indian, with your Indian yellow, with your Indian red, with your rose, which is your red representation. Okay? So the lesson learned from all of this mixing of the colors, right? The colors, when it's just two, yellow and ultramarine blue, creates the kind of green that is nice, clean, vibrant, right? Same thing. Every time it's just two colors, they are much more vibrant than green. Once you green, in this case green, in this case more vibrant purples. Now, once you start going into three color, and you don't want to generally go over three color mixing, then they start to become more gray. See how they, starting with both blues, adding a little bit of all of those in, ends up being gray with different shades of gray, which is actually good, because look how nice these shades of gray look. They don't look dirty and muddy. But if you go into too far, when you start mixing yet an additional fourth color, that's where it's going to start getting a little messy.
Oh no.
By fourth color, I mean something outside of this range. So, for example, if you're working between the two blues, technically you can take a little bit of ultramarine and a little bit of cyan and still call it as one blue, because it will create one type of blue, right, between the ultramarine and cyan. And then you can mix it with any of the yellows, but generally I suggest not to mix both of these yellows in with your blues. Choose either you're gonna mix a certain green just with cadmium or just with Indian yellow, and stick with that throughout the painting. If you are choosing to use cadmium and blue again, then it's probably going to be a different type of greenery. So some greenery is different colors, right? Some is bluish green, some is greener green, muddier greens, more orangey greens. So only when you go in between different types of plants, then you're going to be introducing that. Some are always going to be painted with ultramarine and cadmium, and the degrees of how much of each color there is. And the others are going to be only ultramarine with Indian yellow, and the degrees of how much blue to how much Indian yellow, right? If that greenery is further away, you start adding third color. In this case is your Indian red. And it's going to start pushing them more toward the grayscale, but it's still going to have a hue. So far away greenery in the shadow. Shadows could be more in the ultramarine purpley gray, and in the sunlight it could be more of this greener gray.
So Anything mixed with more than 3 colors is going to end up muddy.
Yeah.
Unlike watercolor.
To a degree, right? So if you're only tweaking the hue a little bit with the fourth color, probably not a problem. If you add too much, it might start becoming too much.
Maybe.
Okay? So I would say that, for example, you can mix one of these grayer hues, right? And then you decided that very quickly somewhere you needed to add a little bit of slightly purplier tint to it. Then you can grab a little bit of your diluted rose, the one that's mixed with the white, not straight out of the tube. That's going to be too much. That will give it just a slight hint of hue change, which especially where the artwork is very nuanced, you just want a slight hint of the hue change. You don't want it to be too strong, right? So the way that the colors you mixed here and they're still sitting there, some are still not used all the way, I suggest often to where when you are painting, you pre-mix some of your colors ahead of time.
Cool.
So when you are a little bit familiar with oil painting, you're kind of familiar with what your colors can do, what they can be mixed like, you pre-mix some of the colors. For example, because Indian red is so strong, you may want to create one of these hues to either lighter or darker degree. Okay, you take some of your Indian, you mix it with a little bit of white, and you keep it either on the lighter scale if your artwork is mostly light, or slightly on the darker scale, but nonetheless, because you know every time you're going to be needing Indian red to create more of the grayish hues like this, if you grab right out of here, it's going to be too strong.
Unless your painting is strong.
Right. Unless you are, if you're painting something very strong, dark colors somewhere, no problem. Grab it right out of the tube, mix with your colors. But everything else, you may need a little more nuanced amounts of your Indian red. So you already have it mixed with white here. You can mix it with white very, very, mild, a lot of white, very little bit Indian red. Or you can mix it to where it's kind of half and half, just to where you lighten it up and it's slightly less strong, right? You can do the same thing with your cyan, because cyan is also very strong pigment. You know how you were grabbing in just a tiny amount and it gives you a ton of blue, right? So the same thing. You can create one of these lighter cyan mixtures, cyan with white, and use that for the rest of your painting until you get to where you need a lot of very dark blue, and then you can use cyan out of the tube. Okay? All right, so how about you now practice how to actually paint something with all of this,
Let's go.
right? All right, so first thing first, you want to moisten the canvas. Just dip your paper towel into the oil, walnut oil, and make it moist. Your paint will flow so much better when it's moist.
How come I didn't do that when I was putting the paint on that canvas?
On this one, because you were just doing the color swatches. It doesn't have to be.
It doesn't have to flow.
Doesn't have to be. This is equivalent of you making the paper wet when you're putting on color.
What?
What? Yeah, making it wet with water.
With
And-
walnut oil.
Yeah, and here you're using walnut oil. See this brush? It's very short, right? It's all worn out brush. It's good for your drawing. Okay, so what I also like to do is give this a little bit of hue already. So I'm not using just white canvas.
But isn't the background white?
Yeah.
I mean, not really, but like still.
Right. It doesn't matter.
Oh, well.
Same paper towel that you used to make it moist, you can now spread your paint, thin layer, and make it a lot less white.
So even if the background's white, you still do that?
Yeah. So you see what I've done is I took Indian yellow and Indian red, right?
Yeah.
And I created this soft, warm glow. So now taking your very short bristle brush, you pick up just a little bit of your paint out of the tube and draw with it. See, same your Indian yellow and Indian red, just thicker. Now it's not going to be soft glow. Now you're creating it like a marker, right? And since you've already done plenty of painting before and drawing, you can come in here and very lightly, here's the edge of the box that they're sitting on. Your apple comes kind of close over here. I'm going to have the apple more to the right and the pear more toward the back, right? And proportionally sizing it up to the width of this canvas, you add in your apple, which from here it looks almost like a kind of pentagon, right? Which corners we're going to later smooth out. Where's the center of it? The center of it is a little more on this end. Also looks kind of similar to pentagon. Okay, I'll make it more pentagon-like.
So you're not measuring?
No. Your drawing skills need to be
already good.
Pretty good. Yeah. This is not the time where you come and start. You can measure some, all right? If you're doing more complicated, let's say the sculpted head portrait, sure, no problem, measure. But that's why so many artists, before they do oil painting, they do drawings. They do very thorough drawings, they do sketches. So by the time they come to do the actual painting, they're already ready for it.
Oh,
okay?
Wow.
Yeah.
That's why you didn't teach me oil painting so early.
Right. So this shadow is going to go right in here and onto the apple. And the pear goes in back. This is where the pear pops out. What kind of pear? How much taller is it than the apple? Something like over here. Comes down. Curvature goes behind the apple. Over here it comes down more like that. More of a round portion over here. And hiding behind. Probably this I got a little too tall. Bring it a little bit higher. Correct. Correct it before it's too late. Look at the silhouette of it. The stem comes out, something like this.
Wow,
Okay.
already looks like the thing. You might
Yeah.
just sign your name.
And the shadow, right? And then behind the pear, this is the edge of the box again. Edge box/table comes out over here. This one's over here. Already you see the perspective, right? You see the perspective happening, and it's good. So we don't need much of anything else. There are some folds in the fabric in the back. It's like so minimal, it's probably not even important for your first try. All right, so that brush is done, except if you want to, you can indicate your shadow. You can indicate that the shadow on the pear starts over here, does something like this, comes over more this way, kind of goes in with the curvature, and then very quickly hides behind the apple, and the apple shadow overlaps it here. So this part of the shadow is from the apple, and this is all the shadow on the curvatures of the pear. This being very much kind of down the middle, and this definitely being more dark. And you can lightly indicate the shadows on the apple. This is mostly in the shadow, mostly in the shadow, mostly in the shadow. Here it's becoming lighter. And then what's in the shadow here, but this part as well, right? This is more in the shadow, and this is now more in the light. And on this side here, it's transitional just transitioning between the light and shadow. Okay, you could do that. You don't have to. You can go straight with your colors. The next step, now that you studied your colors, the next step is to cover everything with your basic color. Just basic color guesses.
Oh.
Right? So the easiest is, of course, we'll start with the apple. Apple is going to be, it's mostly red, and remember how reds are, they're very dark, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm taking your rose, I'm adding your Indian yellow to it to push it a little away from the purpliness of the rose and more toward the slightly orangier end of it, lighter and orangier. And so here I created a little bit of that, right? You can even like put it in here and say, okay, about right.
Yeah.
Okay, for the sunny side, right? For where it's in the light. Now let's give the basic hue to the shadow. I'm starting with Indian without the white, Indian red without the white. And how can we slightly darken it? But we can grab a little bit of your ultramarine. See, I'm grabbing like tiny little pieces of paint. I am going to be working with a shadow, right? So let's see, how will this look? Looks pretty shadowy, pretty dark, right?
Wow.
Okay, so that's your first guess, all right? So let's go ahead and start. I will start with the lighter red that I mixed, and I will put it in thin. I'm not going to use it very strongly thick layer, okay? Mm-hmm. And I'm basically filling in everywhere where the light on the apple is. And you see, my drawing is still very sketchy. It is still not very smoothed out edges.
Mm-hmm.
Here's is going to be transitional between the strongest light and shadow. I filled all the parts that are going to be in the light with this, right? Okay. Now you don't even need to clean the brush. Your shadow color is very dark, so if a little bit of the lighter color gets introduced into it, it's not a big deal. Mm-hmm. The darkness will overpower it, and maybe having it just a tad lighter is a good idea. Come and fill in all of your shadow areas. And now that I'm here near the edge, I will go ahead and smooth out the edges just a little. And again, it's very thin. It's not very thick layer. We're just laying down our basics. Okay? Where else is it? Right in here. At this point, you moisten the canvas and you mixed your colors. You're laying them in very thinly. And when it's very thin, some canvas shines through and makes it a little lighter. And that's not a bad idea. That's not a bad thing, okay? You could now come and just smooth out this transition a little bit so it's not very stark. So you see how this part of the shadow is lighter because I don't have as much paint on it, and I'm actually letting it be because I know that the darkest shadow is actually over here. This is getting some lighter reflections in it, and if it's already looking a little light, it's good. I'm shooting for color and value. Light to dark, and the kind of color that's light and the kind of color that's dark. Okay? In the neighborhood. So here we are, we're in the neighborhood. Yes, it looks a little brownish, but it's the right value darkness, and it's close enough to where, remember when you played with your colors here? Mm-hmm. You know that if you take this Indian red, you can tweak it very easily, push it more toward red, more toward purple, and whatever you need toward green, right? All right, so now I've done that. So I have this lots of reddish brown on my brush, and I'm moving on to the pear. I'm going to clean it off in my mineral spirits a little bit. So that means you're just dipping it in here, kind of let the paint be diluted. It's not a big deal. It's not super clean. You just wipe it. wipe it clean on your paper towel. See, most of the color got wiped off. It's mostly clean. This is good enough. Let's, with a palette knife, let's mix our basic colors for the pear. I'm taking a little bit of yellow. Mostly it is very yellow, right? I'll add a little bit of white to it because it's not very strongly yellow out of the tube. When I look at my yellow out of the tube, I compare it to the pear. Seems like it's not quite that bad. I'm putting it down here, almost like the background color. Not quite. Seems to work. Seems to be all right.
Do you need to cover it?
If the color works without covering the full canvas, you can leave it. How am I going to get the shadow on that pear? The shadow on the pear seems a bit greenish, right?
Yeah.
So remember how you mix some of this more nuanced greens, right?
Mm-hmm.
For example, you can even look at your color swatches and say which one would look better. Something that is not quite as strongly green, so maybe I shouldn't use cadmium for the shadow at all. I will use my Indian yellow that gives me a more mild greens, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to use my white to soften it. Because remember how you got those greenish grays?
Mm-hmm.
And it was a lot of white in them. And how we're going to get that? But give it a bit of ultramarine. So I'm going and picking up just a tad of ultramarine. Let's see how much difference it will make. Okay, so here's my initial mixture. So you see why your color swatches is important. They are important in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So here's, I made my first guess. I'm going to come in here and test. How is that? Definitely not as yellow, right?
Mm-hmm.
Might be a good start, but might need to be a bit darker, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that means I'm taking a little more of my Indian yellow and a tiny smudge of ultramarine.
How come you don't mix with your brush?
You don't want to mix with your brush. This is much more efficient. You make it mix much more thoroughly. You can mix as much as you want, as little as you want with a palette knife. With the brush, you have less control. And you don't overwork your brushes, and you don't have to clean them as much.
Mm-hmm.
The less paint there is on the brush, the better.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's try this one. How's that? Ooh, seems like a good value. And not a bad color. Doesn't look too icky either. Okay, so now I'm taking my brush again. I'm starting with a lighter yellow mixture, right? I'm going to fill in everything that's in the light on the pear and thin. Again, it's thin. So this is how the academic method works. I'm not touching the area where the apple is yet. Where you go and you do your first thin layers of colors and values first. Okay. See how carefully I went around the apple? Because I didn't want that color to bleed. Now you can push it right to the edge. And
Right.
yeah, make sure your apple is more rounded now. Now you can give it that roundness. And the colors didn't bleed, right? So I'm picking up my color again here. I didn't clean my brush off of the light yellow. I just picked up my shadow. And now I'm going to go in here and fill in my basic shadow shape. How is it going over here? It's close to the main basic shadow of the pear. I'm going to make sure that it's a little more rounded here now. Very thin. And the shadow from the apple comes in here, kind of like that. hides behind the apple. Careful against the edge so you don't bring that color and make it bleed into the pear, at least not yet. The reflections come in. And remember how I said this was kind of transitional? It was neither here nor there. I'll pick up a little bit of your yellow, see? Same brush. I had darker value on it now. Now I'm picking up, kind of making it middle. Like that, see? Where else do I see kind of middle ground? Right in here. Again, I'm not worried about the color so much yet at this point. What I am doing is I'm worrying about the value most, right? All I know is that this palette, this set of colors, to produce dark, ugly, muddy colors, I really have to mess them up. But if I just take first initial 2 colors and no more than 3 to get my color values, I can't mess it up. It's not going to look bad, right? Just need to hit it close enough.
What a great palette you have.
Yeah, and that's the success of all the artists. They work on their palette. They perfect it. All right, so now let's do the box. Remember the box / bottom, right? 2 colors again. We're first going for just the 2. What's in the light is light brown, and in the shadow is slightly darker. How you just need to look at that and say, how would I go about getting that warmer brown, almost like darker camel color, perhaps, right? So I guess there is some yellow in it, so maybe my Indian yellow would be a good start. But by itself it looks too orange, right? So if I add a little of my Indian red to it, that's something you didn't do in the color swatches yet. But if I add a little bit of my Indian red to it, white, Indian yellow, Indian red, and I just need to keep it light enough for where the light hits that box, okay? First try. How's that? We have these colors here, everything's warm and golden. Seems like I could add a little more Indian yellow to it to push it a little more toward that yellower hue, right? It's almost like it does have a little more orange in that. But the value of it seems all right. The value doesn't seem like it needs to be any different. So here I added a little more Indian yellow. And now it's starting to turn a little more yellowish, right? How about I add a little more Indian yellow? But I don't want to add too much or it's going to be too open in color. It's not going to be a delicate brown. We don't want it to be... There we go. That's nice. Okay. So this last test was successful. Never mind, the other ones are there. Not a big deal. Because I'm taking my brush. All I'm doing is I'm wiping it off on my paper towel. Most of the yellow from the pear is gone. Very little bit of left. No big deal. Right now we're focusing on basic color value. And I'll start with this one. Successful color for the light, very thin again, right? So here's where I will go carefully around my apple and make sure that the side looks a little more round. Very thinly fill this up. And then I'll go and bring this over here. All of the nuances of that will disappear. My colors, the newly mixed color will overpower that. Here's my light, right? Light on the box. Okay. The box that's going down below is very similar, but a little darker, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pick up some of your Indian red that you mixed with white, and I will add to my mixture, so I tune it down just a little.
With your brush?
Yeah, because it's very little bit. So you already have this mixed. It's already mixed with a palette knife, right? All you need to do is add it to the color that you already have on the brush and give it slightly darker hue. Okay, and I'm letting this be a little bit lighter on the edge because that's where my higher reflection, brighter reflection is anyways, right? Okay, I don't want to bring it all the way to the edges. Not necessary. We're sketching, right? We're doing a quick sketchy study. Now we need that shadow, right? Now I'm going to go back to the palette knife. I'm going to grab my Indian red. Now I need a shadow that is not too dark. See, the apple is being the darkest, but also not too orangey brown. So you can do as simple as experiment. So here's my Indian red with some white. If I put it here, first of all, how is the value?
Darker.
Darker. Actually, it's looking pretty close to the value I need. So I might want to keep it on this value, but what can I change? What does that shadow look like? Looks a little on the greener brown, isn't it? Okay, so how do we make this a greener brown?
Blue.
Yeah, obviously we need to get a little bit of blue. So let's take ultramarine, not as strong as cyan. And first it's going to turn a little purpley. Everything here with that ultramarine blue and your Indian red are turning a bit purpley. Okay, so I'll show you what I mean. It's turned a bit more purpley toward the blue, right? But we needed a slightly greener hue. How did we do the greener hue before? We added one of the yellows, right? But we only need a small amount. So I'm going to add your very small amount of your Indian yellow to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Indian yellow will interact with ultramarine blue, make it a little bit greener. And the red in it will still interact with blue and keep it on the purplier end. So let's see how this now looks. Still could be a little greener. Let's add a little bit more of the ultramarine and Indian yellow.
The struggle is real.
Mm-hmm. So this is where it's, see, for this particular shadow, it is a bit of a doing to get this color and value right from the start, right? But here we are. This also, by adding those colors, it darkened a bit. So we are introducing a little more white back. A bit more white. Because we wanted to keep that particular value, so a little white is also in order. Okay, and you can see that even on the palette, compared to the previous color that was mixed, it already looks considerably greener. Okay, let's put it in here. There we go. So now it's not so purpley. Okay, so now you can easily use that as your starting point. And then if you still want to push it more toward the green, you can. So again, I'm ignoring the fact that I already put those colors in, no big deal, because we're doing thin layers, everything's going to be blended. Carefully more under the fruit. And it's a thin layer. So as your brush runs out of color, use that to make a thinner, far away layer, something where you need it a bit more sketchy. You see?
Yeah.
It's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. And this shadow is more rounded here, rounded, stretched out, goes under the apple, comes a little more forward. And so far it's all the same value, right? But we know that the shadows tend to do what? Tend to get kind of darker under, right? So here I just grabbed a little bit of your already mixed color previously, and I cooled it off more, and it's become just looking like it's a bit darker, right? Mm-hmm. See how I kind of intruded here? If you want to correct it, pick up your previous paint, keep wiping your brush when you need a cleaner color, pick up your previous paint and correct it. All right, and so now we just need this in the back and then the little centers in here. So the back color would be nice to have one of these grayish bluish colors, right?
It's a little red though.
Peachy. It's kind of peachy purpley, but you don't want it to be too strong in color. Huh. So I will again start with ultramarine and white, and I'll keep it even close to the blues over here. And it's not too dark, it's very light. So this is the ultramarine and white, so you can already scope out the value. The value is actually pretty good. It's just too blue.
Looks like it's outside.
Mm-hmm. And now we just need to tune it down, but we're going to use your Indian red with white. A little bit of that. Potent color, remember? It's very potent. And we're going to see what happens here. So again, we're starting with just two colors and white. White is not really a color. Okay, try this. How's that? Looks like this could work for the shadows, for that shadow behind here, right? Mm-hmm. So let's go ahead and just mark it. This will be for the shadow. There's a few little more shadowy like areas here, but the rest has to be a lot whiter, a lot lighter. Okay, so same thing. And a bit warmer. So your Indian red will give you a little bit of the warmth, a little bit of that peachiness, but by itself it may not be enough. See? Looks still a little too cool. So let's introduce one of your Indian yellows with white, the one you already mixed. How will this combine? Let's take a look at that. That's not bad, actually. Look at that. Light and somewhat on the warm side.
I love how you just test colors in your painting. Mm-hmm. Do you actually do that with your paintings?
Yep, all the time.
You're like, no, that's not right. That's right.
Mm-hmm. You kind of need to get first in the neighborhood, like close enough, and then start tweaking them, adjusting them. Huh. All right, so again, I'm only wiping this on my paper towel, right? Now I can switch to a newer paper towel. I'm not dipping it in my mediums. I'm not doing mineral spirits. Why not? Because this is in the background. If this color is not super clean and super sophisticatedly white, it's not a big deal. It may actually give us nice, interesting color combinations. So I'm going to go carefully around the apple here.
Wow.
This is mostly light, right? Again, thin layer. Where is it also the lightest, the cleanest? Right here behind the pear, where it goes behind the pear's shadow. And that's what makes that shadow look so strong. because there is a lighter background behind it. Okay. Thin layer. Go behind here. And the interesting thing is that many people think it's very easy to paint over.
No, it isn't.
With oil, it isn't. If you want to keep your colors nice, vibrant, and fresh. So even though I sketched this stem very lightly, I'm going to paint around the stem. And this here, I will pick this up with my brush, kind of like mix it up together. It is my more shadowy area. It's my test colors. But now that I have the other color on my brush, it will all even itself out, sort of cancel itself out. So here's my one shadowy area. Here's my other medium shadow, nothing too strong. Maybe right here it's becoming a bit stronger, but the rest is really blending with the other stuff. So now that I've done that, I will go ahead and introduce my slightly darker shadow over here, the main division between light and shadow. I'm going to hide this behind the table. I will suggest that there is more shadows forming. And I'm not going to finish the background either. It is completely unnecessary. For my medium hue, transition between stronger light and shadow, I'm just mixing both, the light and the shadow. Okay?
Different color?
Yeah. So you see the light and the shadow mixed together gives you half and half. And that's your transitional. See how I kind of like rubbed it in? Mm-hmm. I intruded a little bit in here. Just wipe your brush, squeeze as much paint out of it, soak it up, pick up a little bit of the shadow color that you still have on your palette.
Go over it?
Yeah, correct it. While it's still wet, it's easy to do. All right, so the last thing is within here, right? Within here, it looks fairly yellow, similar to pear. So I will just, for the simplicity of this demo, I'll use the same one. Where the light is right here. The stem is kind of coming through the middle of it, and there is a shadow from the stem. So that's what I'll do. I'll pick up the pear color for shadow, and I will fill it in over here where that greenery becomes more in the shadow, the yellow part, right? It starts to be more in the shadow. And I'm going to add the stem. Okay, so the stems are very thin. The stem color is kind of darker brown. It's probably one of the darkest ones, right? So what you can do is you can take one of the darker browns, like what you've been working with the apple, within the apple darkness, and just add a little bit of ultramarine blue to it, and that will turn it kind of dark and purpley. And all we need is for it to be darker. And so it's not so purpley, we'll add Indian yellow to it. And suddenly you're getting a more kind of darker brown color that is not like your apple and not like your pear greens and such. See, right now it's very dark, too dark. I will add a little bit of white to it, kind of bring out the true color to show. So you could see what kind of brown it's becoming. Okay, that's pretty good now. So sometimes you can even scratch it in with your palette knife, but I'm going to pick it up with just the very edge. See, it's like right on the tip, barely any paint. And I'm going to very carefully then sketch it in here. Kind of thin, right? That's good. That means you can push a little bit harder and leave it like this, sketchy. And I will come in here and fill in this stem. And then I will also drop the shadow from it. And the shadow from it goes right over here. And then it becomes darker over the red. Here's the shadow. See? That's the shadow from your stem within the apple. Okay, so that's your initial layout of colors and values done. So the next step is to go and give it extra reflections and give it a little more details, right, within. One detail for sure is that highlight in the apple. Highlight in the apple is mostly white, so I'll clean up my brush, a little bit of mineral spirits. I'm not dipping very deep either. See, I'm swooshing it on the side, wiping it on my paper towel, and I'm going to pick up a little bit of white, but so it is not pure that white, I will also mix it with your yellow, cadmium yellow. So it's kind of off-white, okay, very mild yellow. Where does this highlight go? Kind of over here, like that. See how the brush makes some part of it very bright white, and then as you drag it over your previous colors, it blends a little bit with them, right? Good, leave it like that. It is like natural blending. So rather than go over and over, don't do that.
That's too bothersome.
It will start to pick up that red on the bottom, and your highlight will not be so bright. See, it will blend. So in places where you need to, you blend them. In places where you don't need to, don't blend it.
Okay.
Okay. So now let's give a little more nuances for the apple. So what nuances can we give? For example, within the shadows, some parts are slightly purplier. Okay. So how do we achieve those purplier parts? First of all, we can give it a little lighter hue. So your Indian red with white goes into your shadow, makes a little bit, and let's see if this will give us a nice change in value and color. See, it does, but it looks a little too purpley, so we add a little more red. A little more Indian red, a little bit of your rose, goes back in here, and we need it to look a little lighter, but not super light, right? It needs to be a reflection. Then what else can we do? We have a little bit of the warmer glow from the box that's reflecting. Pick up a little bit of your Indian yellow, add it to this color, and come back with your reflection. Give it more reflected light. How's that? Maybe a little bit more Indian yellow. So what you're focusing now is to stay within this hue, within this, not the hue, within this value, but not change the hue too drastically, right? Mm-hmm. So now you can add a little bit more ultramarine blue to where you were working with your apple shadow. So here's your shadow of the apple here. Add a little more ultramarine blue to it. And it darkens it and makes it just a tad purplier. let's make that slightly stronger terminator, a little bluer. And where else is it? Kind of strong, kind of over here. Punch up your terminator and give it a little cooler hue. Just a little, I just touched, just barely touched. Then if I add my Indian yellow to that, it will push the hue slightly different once again. And I guess I can make it a bit lighter. And then the reflection on the side of the pear will be a bit greener. You can even grab some of the pear color and add it to it. So let's create a stronger reflection here. See, I grabbed some of the greener pear shadow and I'm putting it right on the edge. This stays darker, this starts to become lighter, because that's your reflection. And then slightly orangier reflection. That's where you pay more attention to the kind of hues and colors within the reflection. And it stays a little bit darker here. So go back to your slightly darker color here. Slightly darker toward the shadow here, just so you don't lose it. Darker comparing to the reflection. And then here it starts to become lighter. So I'm picking up the color you mixed for your lighter part of the apple, adding it in here. I am going to add it a little bit in here. And still is like pretty dark, right? So again, clean off the dark ones by dipping it in mineral spirits just a little bit. Just dilute it a bit. Wipe it on your paper towel so that it's not so dark. Go back to your red you already mixed for the light and start working a little bit on these nuances here. So you get the idea with the apple, right? And then the same thing basically with the pear as what you did with the apple. You start working on more nuances within the shadow by now showing me the reflection, by showing me a few like differences in value within the light. So for example, like in the apple, right here, it still is a bit darker than the main red that you mixed. So you get a little bit of both and introduce them into here so that your red is not so brightly red, right? The brightest portion is obviously around right in here. But everything else is starting to get a bit darker. Basically use the same rules as you did with watercolor. So for example, like right down here, I'll just darken this a little bit. What am I doing? I am grabbing the colors I already mixed. For example, borrowing a little bit from the apple. And adding it in here to darken this part of the shadow. And why is it appropriate to borrow it from the apple color? Because the apple reflects in the brown of the box.
Yeah.
Okay? Okay, so let's continue. So the apple looks closer to finish. The pear needs work. So I already established that the pear has that slightly greener hue in the shadows. Now I just need to take a closer look and see where are the reflections, what color reflections, whether the shadow should stay this particular darkness or if it could go darker. For example, I'm looking at the contrast between these two, and the apple being so much darker and stronger in color, contrasting the pear seems kind of to fade a bit. So to keep the pear from fading, I'm going to punch up a little bit of the shadow color in the pear. So it's the same color as I already mixed. I'm just gonna darken it by a bit. Still gonna keep it on the slightly greener side, but in some places I'll give it a little darker value. Okay, like here, cast shadow from the apple. A little bit here, a little bit darker. A bit along the side here. And basically I'm looking at the pear and saying to myself, where do I see slightly darker hue? And that's where I'm putting my brush spots or color spots. All right, so that's slightly, I introduced slightly stronger contrast in there, right? So I will go ahead and darken a little bit around the stem here as well. And also because I darkened that, this part's actually starting to look like they are reflections. And because I'm just touching it lightly in this area, I'm not doing any super strong contrasts. It all gets tuned down very little bit. So I'm not making big changes to my initial values. So for example, I'm seeing that right here the value is fairly nice, but it has a slightly warmer hue. So I'm going to add slightly warmer hue in both places and tune it to the rest. Just have a complete tune-up for that area. Soften up these transitions so it doesn't look too strong. And again, I'm picking up some of what I've already mixed with some of these colors here that have slightly oranger hue. And I'm gently rubbing them into this area where the pear is. And I'm picking up some of my cadmium yellow with a little bit of white that I mixed initially. And I'm seeing that while right here the yellow is very light, very strong, the pear just has that kind of shape where its strongest light is hitting it right here. The strongest light is also hitting it on this side. But right through the middle, it has that very slight change in hue and value, very slight. And when I'm looking at that, I'm seeing that it's basically my cadmium yellow, the pear color I already have in here, but it has just a little orangey, a warmer hue. Perhaps a little bit of the apple is influencing this area. And the brightest changes right on this line. So I'm going to come in here with a little bit of my cadmium yellow mixed with a little bit of that Indian yellow. And I'm adding very little bit of Indian yellow because I don't want to have a huge change. I just want a very soft little change in here in color and value. Bring it right to the apple carefully. And there we go. So now it is starting to appear. Now that pear irregularity is appearing. And what I see again is that on the edge of the pear here, where the pear goes into the curvature and toward the background, it's once again becoming a little warmer, and it's warmer kind of after the highlight hitting the pear. So I'm going to go ahead and touch here and see how does that look. Looks good. So I'll come in here right on the edge, and I'll also take this opportunity to smooth out this curvature so it's not too strong here, and create that transition to where this is the brightest part of the pear. Again, once again, the planes change in this area. The plane that is turning more toward the light, the plane that's more away from the light. And I will punch up that slightly highlight looking light. Just like that. So here we go. Now it definitely looks like a lighter portion of the pear. Receiving brightest light is right here, a little bit along this ridge, and then this ridge goes into having this part as the brightest, but just not quite as bright as the rest. And on this side, this is another brighter area. And down the middle, there's a little dent. Another beneficial spot for a little bit of an orangier color is right here next to the stem I'm seeing. And I am just bringing in a little bit on the tip of my paintbrush, adding it very, very delicately in there. Just a little touch. All right. Now I'll come back and give a little more definition to the background. Since I've worked a lot over here, I can now define my background a little bit better. So getting back to my ultramarine, very mild ultramarine blue and Indian red with a lot of white. I'm going to adjust this a bit, give it just a slightly darker hue, darker value, and slightly different hue right in here. And that will bring that edge a little bit closer to us. It still is very big. I don't want it to be too obvious, but it is now a little bit more contrasting against the background. So again, we don't want to work too much on the background because this is just the first try at academic painting. This is not so much about the background, really. It's testing out what you can do with the brush, with the colors. And the rest of it is still going to stay lighter because we need it on the lighter side, right? You can just go ahead and blend this and just completely blend that with the shadow, since we don't want anything too obvious in here. This becomes slightly lighter through the middle. What kind of lighter? We can give it a little bit of a warmer hue. But not too white. So I'm just adding my previously mixed colors, mostly Indian red with white, and I'm adding a little bit of yellow to it, cadmium yellow, also with white. And I'm giving this a bit of a warmer push. Some of my yellow underpaint shines through, and that's totally appropriate. It's actually a pretty good idea to let it happen, because it just adds a bit of the extra interest and a little bit of that warmer hint, just to say in the back there, slightly warmer with the light, but not totally white. Add a little variety to this one. So far it's all one color. You can now add a bit of the variation. Now I pushed it a little toward the slightly redder, purplier color. Again, only because I added a little bit of my Indian red with white. Now on the pear, we can add a little warmer reflection, even warmer than the one we have, because, for example, where it reflects the box, it goes a lot more brown. So now is the time where you can take Indian yellow that's already mixed a little bit with Indian red and just rub it in. Rub it in the kind of way that you don't disrupt the value of this area, at least not much. So here we go, it became warmer, and it still feels like it's reflecting. It's reflected light. And as it goes down here, that reflected light, the brown box table, whatever you want to call it, what's on the bottom here, is becoming darker and casting a darker reflection. It's also facing into the shadow, so you can darken that carefully. If it's not enough, you can pick up more paint and carefully add that in. So since now we are coming into this area with this darker shadow on the table / box, making this area darker, making this reflection darker, we can also make sure that this reflection has a little bit of that very, very red apple influence. So pick up some of the red from the apple and very carefully suggest a little change in hue here with the redness. Here we go, because none of the area here is very bright, but none of it is all the same in color. So this very bright greenish needs to go. It's not welcome here. because it's too light and too strongly green. And now I see an opportunity, now that I tuned this down, to make this even darker. And now I can pick up some of my colors I used for the shadow of the box and create something slightly darker, and do this darkest portion right under the pear, and do the same thing right under the apple. See there, under the apple it could go even darker. And this is a nice dark color I got here. I like how it's turning out, so I'm going to also go ahead and use that to restore my little stem. And while I'm at it and it's a right dark value, I'll come in here and help this stem. Make this a bit darker. And additionally, I'm going to darken my greener hue shadow inside this apple. And again, the area is already filled in nicely with all of that. All I need to do is come in here and just touch a little in the area and just give it a slightly darker push, very slightly. Because what I have is already close to being what I need. I am just pushing it a little further. And that is again my ultramarine blue, Indian yellow, white. No, I'm just giving it a little deeper color. All right, so this is coming out pretty good. I don't want to overwork it. It's a first study, it's your first try, so let's just add a little more reflective light within our cast shadow on the table. So for example, right here, the pear is doing reflective light. So I'm picking up a little bit of my pear, but also a little bit of my box color. And I'm going to create something that is kind of in between. So this is the pear casting some reflection here. And as that goes away from us and toward the back, it's becoming slightly darker in value, but also not as dark as all of this here. All right, so here we go. I will even push it a little further, and I will bring it a little closer to the edge of the pear. And really what is happening is that edge of the pear here is where the bottom, the little box table is darker here and the pear is lighter. But right here where the reflection is getting really close to the pear, it's where the pear is the one that becomes darker than that part of the reflection. So that's where you have to very carefully adjust the color and value of this area. And that means that now we can push our pear, this side of the pear, into even darker reflective light. So it stands out next to that reflected pear light. There we go. You can leave it just like this, or you can give it a little blending. It really doesn't matter much. It's all a matter of technicality until you develop your style. All right, so this is fine. We'll just soften up this transition so it doesn't attract attention. Let's give this a bit of a push into the distance by bringing a little ultramarine blue and Indian yellow to it. very little bit, mild touch up and blend. And now that went into the distance, it's not so strongly yellow and not so much sunshine. And if we give this a bit of the same treatment, we will be able to soften up this shadow, because this shadow is not very strong. It's further away from light. And on this end, it's also very, very mild transition. It's not a strong cutout shadow. There is not much of the contrast. All right. Added a little bit of that ultramarine with white and a little teeny bit of Indian red, which also already mixed with white. All right, so this shadow is more washed out. It's further away. This is coming in closer. So now we can work on this shadow. It had that slightly greener hue in certain places. All right. Right here, I'm basically grabbing my pear color from here and adjusting this hue, just pushing it a little bit. There we go. Now it looks more reflected, like reflected light. The hue changes once again when it goes this way, away from it. The hue becomes a little redder, so I'll be grabbing a little bit of my Indian red with the darker, with the rose that I mixed for the shadow, and I'll be adding it right here. But I don't want it to look too dark, so I'm also picking up a little bit of that Indian yellow, because this needs to look like a reflected light, reflected reddish light, reflecting from the apple. Also, when I was doing this, I slightly went over the side of the apple. It's totally fine. It's actually a very good idea to have a little bit of this going on here and there, because it that kind of smudge softens up this edge, and it helps our apple not to feel too cut out against the pear. So all of this edge is very much imperfect, and even here I have it kind of imperfect, and I'm leaving it like that. I'm happy with that, because we are studying all the color and transitions, and it's the first time. We don't want to go sit here and go super precisely at everything. Keep it looser and focus on more your intuitive approach, since you've studied plenty already. All these years of learning to draw and paint in watercolor are now showing what you can do in oil. And this becomes more intuitive. So now I'm going to do the edge of the table here with its highlight. We already left it a little bit white. Now I'm just going to make sure that it definitely looks like my table highlight, using my cadmium yellow and white, and using the table color that I already created earlier. I'm gonna add it in here, soften this up. Do we want to attract too much attention to this? I don't think so. I think we want to just suggest that there is this table. We don't want to spell absolutely everything, but we do want to have the proper hue changes. And we don't want it to be totally boring and the same. So now I'm going to create a bit of a color hue changes. Warm to cool. Add it in here. Intensify it only in the middle. Soften it up everywhere else. Leave this completely unfinished. Now I give it a little bit that atmospheric feel, because it's not such a strong color anymore, which is totally appropriate. That's pretty good. So what can we do to improve it? A few highlights on the stems of the apple, I guess. We can add that. You can do that with just the side of the touch of the brush, or you can actually also do it with your palette knife. You pick up right on the edge of the palette knife, pick up a little bit of your color for what is going to become your highlight, and you look for where does it go. And here we go, here's your highlight, and it goes into the shadow, so you don't want to draw it all the way in. And the same thing for the highlight on the stem of the pear. Somewhere in here, it has a bit of that reflected light right on the edge, and the rest obviously is darker. So I will bring this here, and I will punch up the darker stem next to this highlight. Make sure it definitely goes into that little center of the apple, where I can additionally add a little bit more to that shadow. And again, that's just to deepen it. I'm picking up just a little bit with my palette knife, deepening that. It's making it a little more stronger transition. And I'm doing it with the palette knife because that's the easiest way to get it done without interrupting all the brush work I've already done. This is also here is in the shadow, so that's why I'm adding that green apple shadow color and adding a little warmth to it. So here we go. And just behind that, I want to make it slightly darker to give that more depth. There we go. So that kind of simulates what I'm seeing happening inside there. And I think I'll add a little bit of a color splash to that stem right next to my highlight right here. It's actually Indian yellow. There we go. So the stem doesn't feel all the same strength of highlight and color, because that's a bit unnatural. No, it's not. No, it's more irregular. Okay. So just the very edge of the stem where it's very sharp and contrasting gets that strong reflection. So what else can I improve? I can probably punch up the darkness of that shadow right under the apple. That definitely can be improved. And of what color can we do it? It's so dark, so it's probably a lot of ultramarine blue, some reflected light from the apple, so a little bit of the Indian red will darken it up pretty good. And if I just come in here and touch up a bit, and then soften it up, blend it with the colors I already have, that will give me that value and color I'm looking for. All right, so the table box is pretty good, nice clean color, and I don't want to mess it up, but I do want to straighten out that shadow a bit and make sure that my box on which this is all sitting is looking nice. So I cleaned up my brush. I'm going to pick up a little bit of this color here, soften up this line. And now I'm going to introduce a little bit of the white to make this a bit lighter. And so how's the shadow going onto the apple? It disappears pretty quickly there. Okay, just even this out a bit. And pretty much we're getting close. We can soften up this a bit more with the redness of the apple. The apple is turning, so the redness of the apple is changing in hue, and it's not quite as red and it's not quite as light just yet. And so this, I'm just basically taking my rose and adding a little variation here. Rose, because this was rose with Indian yellow. And now just adding rose by itself makes it feel more like this is slightly darker and slightly cooler. And of course that's a good thing, because we are looking for that variety in all of our values. What else do I see? I see that a little bit of a darker hue goes up in here, so it's a little dent in the apple. And I already kind of made it a little darker here, so there's another slight feeling of the apple having a slight dent. I don't want to overdo it again. The other dent is happening right where this shadow is, so we can make sure that this feels more dented. And on this edge, as the apple is going away from us in this direction, I will be adding a little bit of rose to this as well, so it feels more round. Okay, so now that I'm looking at it, I'm seeing that this becomes a little uncertain, so I will come in here and pick up again the color I already have for my background that I already used, and I'll just even this bump out. I'm pushing it like less than 1 millimeter, that's it, just so it's not so obviously irregular.